All right, guys, so California has been making headlines again, but this time it's not about wildfires or tech billionaires leaving the state. We're talking about some serious allegations of fraud under Governor Gavin Newsom's administration. And I'm not just talking about a few $1,000s here and there, we're talking tens of billions with a B. So let me break down what's been happening because this is absolutely wild. Okay, so I found this breakdown of what's being called one of the largest and most convoluted schemes in modern history. Investigators discovered that California has essentially been funneling taxpayer money from all across America to prop up their own state finances. Here's how this works, and this is genuinely insane. There's this thing called the Genesis Plan that started in 2022. It revolves around intergovernmental transfers, which basically means when a local hospital or county transfers money to the state Medicaid agency for services like ambulance rides. Now here's where Newsom comes in. California abused this system by raising the price of a simple ambulance ride by nearly 300%. We're talking about going from around $339 to $1,600 per ride in some cases. Like, think about that for a second. 300% increase. So after the local hospitals make these transfers to the state, California can then request matching funds from the federal government. But then, and this is the scam part, once they get those federal matching dollars, California turns around and pays a private ambulance service which costs only a fraction of the original price. They're literally pocketing the difference. This is straight-up money laundering, but with federal taxpayer dollars. Gavin Newsom raised reimbursement rates by up to 500% in some areas. The state claims federal matching dollars at typically 50%, and then they reimburse private ambulance providers at the original lower cost. They're effectively stealing federal funds to offset California's budget shortfalls. And apparently this was all designed so California wouldn't have to spend a single dollar from their own general fund. Wild. Now this ambulance thing? Just the beginning. We're looking at up to $76.5 billion or more in fraudulent spending across California. Let me play you this clip from Newsmax where they break down the state auditor's report.
California Congressman Kevin Kiley, he is sounding the alarm in his home state, saying under Governor Gavin Newsom's leadership, it has become the, quote, fraud capital of America.
And we have team coverage. Our national correspondent Alana Austin is on Capitol Hill with more on the investigations into Tim Walz. But we start with correspondent Heather Myers, who has more on what is going on in California. A rainy day out there on the West Coast. Heather, what can you tell us?
Well, good afternoon to you, Katrina and Andrew. This latest report was issued by the state auditor, and that's a nonpartisan position. That state auditor now puts 8 state agencies on the high-risk list of agencies to watch out for things like fraud and mismanagement as well as waste. Here's a look at that 92-page report. Newly added to the high-risk list is California's food stamp program. If the state doesn't get the improper payments under control, it could cost an extra $2.5 billion. Also on there is the Department of Finance, which was tasked with giving out COVID relief funds. Critics say $32 billion of that was taken by fraudsters. Then there are infrastructure issues like California's deteriorating dams and also the high-speed train that's already cost taxpayers $18 billion without a single section of track complete. Other reports cite $24 billion spent on the homeless issue that critics claim the state lost track of. More recently, there's a report that says California cell phone users paid a surcharge for years to upgrade the state's 911 system. Here's Congressman Kevin Kiley talking about what happened to that plan.
That after spending $650 million on that system, the state is totally scrapping it and starting over, completely wasted the money because the technology doesn't work. Mind you, we are very close to Silicon Valley in Sacramento, and yet the government can't figure out how to make basic technology perform.
Okay, so wow. 8 state agencies on a high-risk list. And this is coming from a nonpartisan state auditor, not some political hack. California's food stamp program alone could cost an extra $2.5 billion if they don't fix it. The Department of Finance that was handling COVID relief? $32 billion taken by fraudsters. $32 billion. And then she mentions the high-speed rail that's cost $18 billion without a single section of track complete. Not 1 mile. $18 billion and you can't ride it anywhere. There's also $24 billion spent on homelessness that critics say the state just lost track of. How do you lose track of $24 billion? Oh, and Congressman Kevin Kiley at the end there talking about the 911 system. They spent $650 million on it, and they're completely scrapping it and starting over because the technology doesn't work. $650 million just wasted. He's right there when he says, mind you, we are very close to Silicon Valley and Sacramento, and yet the government can't figure out how to make basic technology perform. That's embarrassing. And if all of that wasn't enough, just last month in November, Newsom's former chief of staff, Dana Williamson, was arrested and indicted on 23 federal charges. Bank fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, filing false tax returns, making false statements, the whole criminal menu. The allegations? She and 4 others allegedly funneled $225,000 from a dormant campaign account for personal use. But wait, there's more. She's accused of claiming over $1.7 million in fraudulent business expenses on her taxes. We're talking about a $15,000 Chanel bag, a chartered jet, and a nearly $170,000 birthday trip to Mexico. This was his chief of staff, the person working closest with him. And the FBI investigated this for 3 years, with prosecutors handing over 27,000 pages of evidence. So even Democrats are starting to freak out about this. Congressman Ro Khanna from Silicon Valley said constituents have been flooding his inbox all week about fraud, waste, and abuse in Sacramento. Yesterday, he announced he's pushing for congressional hearings and a full independent audit of California's budget in 2026. Khanna literally said, "I hear you," to his constituents and called the situation outrageous and appalling. When a California Democrat is publicly calling out Newsom like this, you know it's serious. Trump's been hammering this too. He posted on Truth Social saying there's more fraud in California than Minnesota, if that is even possible. And when you add in election fraud, they're tied for first. 2 crooked governors, 2 crooked states. Now Newsom's office fired back, calling Trump a deranged, habitual liar and claiming they've blocked over $125 billion in fraud. But when you've got your own state auditor's report, Democratic congressmen demanding investigations, and your former chief of staff facing 23 federal charges, those talking points ring pretty hollow. Let me show you this other clip because there's even more waste they found.
A state auditor report, this is supposed to be a nonpartisan auditor that works for the state, found that 8 agencies pose a high risk to the taxpayer of California because the fraud is rampant, uncovering almost $100 billion worth of fraud. Listen to how Congressman Kevin Kiley from California spelled it out.
And all of this, by the way, comes on top of the incredible fraud and waste and mismanagement that we already knew about. The high-speed train where there's been no track laid in 17 years, spending $18 billion. The $32 billion during COVID at a minimum of unemployment insurance fraud. The $650 million on a canceled 911 next generation system that was canceled because the technology wasn't there. And so California is absolutely, under this governor, the fraud capital of the United States.
Well, it most certainly could be. Minnesota looks pretty bad, but I don't know. Not even close to California, and nobody's talking about this.
So they're saying the auditor found almost $100 billion worth of fraud. Kevin Kiley breaking down that high-speed train again. No track laid in 17 years. $18 billion spent. The COVID unemployment insurance fraud was at minimum $32 billion. That 911 system that got canceled was $650 million wasted. And he's absolutely right when he says California is the fraud capital of the United States under this governor. Minnesota looks bad, but California is on another level. The most offensive one to me is that $24 billion on homelessness, only to see homelessness rise. Like, where did that money go? And then Newsom has the audacity to say they're decreasing the incline. Not decreasing homelessness, just decreasing how fast it's growing. That's not a win. That's an excuse. All right, so here's where we're at with all this. California under Gavin Newsom is facing massive allegations of systematic fraud across the board. You've got this ambulance scheme that's basically laundering federal money through inflated Medicaid costs. Billions lost to COVID fraud. Failed infrastructure projects eating up taxpayer dollars with nothing to show for it. A former chief of staff now facing serious federal charges for allegedly stealing campaign funds for luxury purchases. And the scale is just mind-blowing. We're potentially talking about $76 billion or more. That's not a rounding error. That's California's entire public education budget for a year. Even Democrats like Ro Khanna are now demanding accountability and full audits. Republicans have been calling California the fraud capital of America, and honestly, when you look at these numbers, it's hard to argue. The real question is whether there will actually be consequences. Because California loves to position itself as this progressive leader, showing the rest of the country how things should be done. But maybe they should focus on not losing tens of billions of dollars in fraud before lecturing everyone else. This story is still developing, and I have a feeling more is going to come out. The FBI investigations, the congressional hearings Khanna is pushing for, the state audits. We're probably just scratching the surface here. All right, guys, that's it for today. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this. Is Newsom going to face real accountability, or is this just going to blow over? Drop your thoughts below.